I got the book. It's coming out in October, but I've got they sent me a couple of boxes of the first print run. And so, yeah, it's cool to have in my hands. I think this is going to be my hope is that this book is helpful for founders. My goal is to get it in front of as many founders as I can. I put 2 years of hard work and a lot of hard writing into this. Like the writing part wasn't hard, but accessing the stories and the pain and being honest and candid about the things I screwed up and like reflecting on them, there was some emotion happening there, especially, I mean, when you consider the fact that in 2015, I took a startup and went 0 to $1 million in 3 months in ARR in 3 months. And that startup doesn't exist anymore. And I don't have a huge exit under my belt. And my company's name isn't Outreach or Sales Loft. You should get Gerald Undone to come tour your studio.
Oh, because isn't he local? Like he's from around here.
He's an Ontario boy for sure. I don't know if he's right in Toronto.
Yeah, I will do that. Yeah. I think he would just lose his mind if he came here. He should
just
live here.
Tear you apart.
I get a 0 rating.
Yeah, no totally, gold star or purple star for you.
Gerald Undone, legend.
It's crazy.
That was a great intro right there. So we're talking to Gerald Undone today. No, Collin. That's it. But yeah, okay. So Collin, it's been a while since we talked. You've been selling stuff all this time, and now you're selling a better way to sell or something. You want to, I think we should just jump into this book right from the get-go. You've written a book.
I have.
And can you just spell out the title for us, please? And we're going to do introductions and stuff after we talk about this book.
It's THE space T.
I am in first grade, so.
Yeah. Well, you said spell it out. It's The Terrifying Art of Finding Customers.
Yeah. Okay. So brilliant title. And it's absolutely like on point because everyone hates sales, right? Like everyone has this apprehension to either playing that role in their organization, if they're a founder, or let's say anyone that's in the RevOps wheelhouse that doesn't sit on sales side, maybe they're customer support. And I even see this in my own business where we have people in CS where they have this apprehension to sales that's limiting their efficacy in their job because sales is just about communications. So I don't know. We'll get to my thoughts, but first break down why you wrote this book. And is this a project that came like spur of the moment in Mallorca on a beach, or what's the background?
I mean, I come from the company Predictable Revenue. And I mean, I started a company, it turned into Predictable Revenue. I didn't write the Predictable Revenue book. At the time, a few years ago, our board was not pressuring, but, advising me to, hey, we got to write the sequel because, the original book is 20 years old and, it's not super relevant anymore. So we got to stay relevant. And so I started writing a sequel and I realized I hated it. Not Predictable Revenue, but just sales development in general. I felt like I have a very lazy brain. And if it's not unique, if it's not new, it just felt like there was no reason to be writing the book because Jeb Bloat wrote Fanatical Prospecting and that was fantastic. Predictable Revenue was great as well. Jeb's book was great. Trish's book was great. Mark Roberge's book was amazing. Like these all covered, some of the topics. And I just felt like I don't want to write something that's just regurgitating other things. I wanted to write something that is, here's a net new thing that nobody has talked about. That is something that I've learned. And I didn't feel like, interesting, the 21 different sales development tactics that we've tried over the last, 13 years was a really interesting read. So I started writing that. I bailed halfway through. I started talking to the publisher of Obviously Awesome and The Coaching Habit, April Dunford's book, good local person there. And Trina, the founder, she's actually based close to Vancouver. And she sent me a book that one of their authors had written called How to Write a Must Read. And I read that, ended up throwing out half the book. And what it came down to is I found that there was a couple of things that I found a few hills I was willing to die on. And a few of them weren't really being discussed. And I think the first one came from just myself coming to, back in the day, walking into Launch Academy, being the dirty salesperson of Launch Academy in this just clandestine pit of, engineers. And like, I was the one person on the phone making all the noise, the only salesperson they let into that area.
And just
And
tell everyone,
so
for our global like listeners and viewers, like what Launch Academy is. I think some Canadians, OGs, will know what that is in the tech scene, but even new guys don't necessarily know the legacy of Launch Academy.
I mean, Launch is the genesis of a lot of great companies based in Vancouver right now. Like Ray and the team there have done phenomenal work. In fact, it was a co-working space, and they also had an accelerator called Grow Lab running out of it back in the day. And when I got in, I think it was, it might have been something else like Hack Hut or something like that. We were based out of Eastside Games, but it was basically just a place for startup founders to come hang and build their startups. And I was the only salesperson there. And I had to learn customer development, and I had to learn product management. And what I noticed was that customer development, looking for a pain, an opportunity, a reason to build a company, is something that is very similar to running a sales discovery call, right? In both cases, you're looking for pain. In both cases, you're asking questions. In both cases, you want to talk about the thing that you want to do. And there's this natural reflex to just show up and throw up. But that's the wrong thing to do.
Show up and throw up. I've never heard that phrase, but it's awesome. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's just like basically the idea there being like, I want to tell you everything amazing in 2 seconds because I'm so excited. And then I'm overpowering you and you're just like, get out of my face.
Totally. And none of this is relevant. And I did that when I was trying to start my first company, Voltage CRM. And I read about customer validation in the Lean Startup. And I went, cool, I'm going to go validate my idea. And to me, validating my idea was showing it to other people and going, isn't that cool? And they go, yeah. And I went, cool, validation, check. But that's not validation.
No.
I learned this the hard way because I built the thing that everybody said was cool and a really smart idea. And I had a ton of people tell me, oh, that's really smart. You're really smart. This sounds really smart. And I was like, wow, everybody really likes my idea. So we built it. And I came back and asked them if they'd pay for it. And they were like, no. All of them. No. Shit. Yeah. So I had to learn the hard way real customer development. And that was sitting down, shutting up, listening, and actually hearing what people were saying. And I think this is kind of the crux of where a lot of startup founders fail is they do what I do and they just build out their ideas and they do a very light touch of customer development. They don't actually get deep and really understand, not just what are the problems, but how do you see the problems? How would you rank them in terms of importance to you? And like, how satisfied are you with how you're currently solving that problem? Right. If I would have asked those 2 questions to everybody who I was trying to build my crappy CRM idea for, never would have got off the ground because everybody said, yeah, it's a 10 out of 10 important problem, but I'm like 8 or 9 satisfied. To me, there's no gap there. And I did a horrible job as a salesperson because I didn't find out where their pain was. Yeah. And so tying this back to the book, what I learned was obviously you need to ask these questions. You need to ask them the right way. I didn't set out to write a book on customer development, and I don't think I did, but there are customer development themes in there. But what I noticed was the more pain you find, the easier it is to sell. And when I pulled my head out of my ass and I stopped building my ideas and I started building stuff to solve problems that people wanted to solve, oh, wow, suddenly we went 0 to $1 million for the service version of our product in a year, 0 to $1 million ARR. And then when we launched the software version of it, we went 0 to $1 million in 3 months. Like I hammered the phones. I sent so many emails. I had 150 meetings to try and sell this crappy CRM and one person bought. And it was the first person I talked to. And so, I mean, maybe not the first, but it was up there. 150 and 1 sale versus we pivoted. We're building things that people wanted. I sat down with 5 people and I came from my first 5 meetings and I came out of those 5 meetings with 7 customers because 2 of the sales leaders called a friend in the middle of the meeting and went, yeah, James, are you in? This guy's doing this sales development thing as a service. It's this, that. Yeah. Okay. James is in too. And like, I came out of it with 7 customers. And like this felt like the rock was finally rolling downhill.
Right.
And like so I walked that experience. And then I also, like, as a parallel path, we bootstrapped the company. And so as we were going, we were basically running sales development campaigns for our clients. And there was, as part of the service, we were always trying to find, okay, well, how do we get to this, 2-year customer lifetime, right?
Mhm.
We were like initially 3 months and 6 months and 7 months, and we were trying to grow, but we really struggled to break past the like 12-month average. It's like, how do we get somebody to 2 years? Because with sales development, that's really what you need to get somebody to get to like true ROI on a sales development program when you factor in all the investments, all the time, all the learning. So, like, how do we get there? And so we're looking at our customers as cohorts and we're doing all this analysis.
Right.
And we just couldn't, when you look at like the winners and the losers, the folks that got an extreme amount of value out of your service versus the people that didn't,
Yeah.
the only thing that we could come back to was the ones that got an extreme amount of value out of our service had really strong product market fit. The ones that struggled and used a ton of our resources didn't get anything because product market fit wasn't that weak or wasn't that strong.
Right.
And it wasn't super obvious. We weren't really convinced because you don't want to cherry pick, or you don't want to say, oh, this company, we don't think they have strong product market fit. Because if you had that strong of a barometer for strength of product market fit, you probably should be a VC and not running a sales agency or a cold email agency. And so we did it. We had a lot of things in the sales process. We had a lot of tests we'd run, but and we didn't really double down on it until probably halfway through 2017, or 2016. At the beginning of 2016, one of our customers, the VP of sales, got poached by Uber to help start Uber Everywhere, which eventually turned into Uber Eats. And as part of this project, they wanted to reach out. They had 100 AEs in the field. They wanted to book meetings with the top 50 restaurants in every city and top by the number of ratings on Yelp and the average rating. We had some like algorithm that we worked out. On average, one of our folks, we had, these account strategists, and Krista was one of our best, and she was booking probably 60 meetings a month for split between, I don't know, 6 or 7 clients. She would book, I don't know, 10 to 12 meetings per client. And she had, 5 or 6 clients. And so she was booking 60 meetings, 70 meetings a month on average. We gave Krista Uber when they came in. And in the first month in January, we sent 1,000 emails. How many meetings do you think we booked?
70%?
We booked 327 meetings.
Okay.
Off 1,000 emails.
Yeah.
Which is just, when you go from like 60 email or 60 meetings a month off of 10 or 15,000 emails, right? That's a pretty signiant.
Oh, it's a totally different reality, isn't it? It's like people actually want this. They're ravenous for this. They need to talk to us. They wanted it yesterday. Exciting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so we're like, okay, well, did Krista magically get 6 times better? Or did Uber, the strength of their product market fit, carry the campaigns? And like, no shout, or like, nothing against Krista. She's amazing, but she didn't suddenly miraculously get 6x better.
Right.
And so clearly this was the proof point that, oh, wow, strength of product market fit is a multiplier of go-to-market efforts. And so coming back to the book, one of the core ideas is that you need to strengthen your product market fit before you start investing in go-to-market. And it was this kind of experience coupled with, it was my own, getting to $1 million in ARR in 3 months, seeing Uber go and get 327 meetings in a single month, and then seeing a bunch of their fast followers screw it up. Hundreds of companies that we worked with that would do the exact same things as some of the other companies that were producing 20, 30 meetings a month and get nothing out of it. And so that's the thing that I wanted to help founders see, was that the strength, the more of a pain, the deeper of a pain you find, the more valuable it is to solve, the more dissatisfaction you find with this target ideal customer profile that you're trying to build for, the more of that there is, the easier everything else is going to be downstream. It's one of those do not pass go, do not collect $200 moments. And I find so many founders are stuck on, I have a customer, I have a product, I have product market fit. But product market fit isn't binary. It's not something that you check the box or you don't check the box. It's something that exists on a spectrum. Uber
Well,
had
also, you called it out right there, right? I think too many people get caught, especially now if we're talking about startup founders in tech, there's that identity, but even in general, any type of entrepreneur, uh, you don't need to have scale built into your business model in order to realize trends and understand how they relate to your the growth potential, even if that's not massive scale. But this idea of like product market fit is very different than product customer fit. And right, if that customer is not a profile of customer, it can screw you up big time, because that customer might even be a scale customer and you're getting so excited because that scale customer is paying your bills, but you need 10 of them really to like keep going with this business after a year or something. You know, it's not representative of market trends or appetite for what you're selling if you've got like, if you can't grow your customer base.
Exactly. And that's the hard piece to see. And I struggled with that as well. It took me 18 months of beating my head against a brick wall, going, I know how to sell, I know how to prospect, I'm booking meetings. Why is nothing moving forward? And because I had product customer fit, but that customer wasn't a representative sample of the whole market. I just found the one niche Bob who hated Salesforce and loved what we did. And so we were able to close Bob, but Bob was one of N of one.
Okay. So you wanted to solve this or enable people to solve this for themselves and kind of approach the refactoring of the lens on like why they're selling, how they're selling by retooling kind of like their approach to market, right? It's like start there and then you can really sell. Tell me more.
Yeah. I mean, I think I work with founders and I've been working with founders for the last 13 years, and I'm right now working with a lot more than I typically am. But founders get stuck at a variety of different stages, right? I got stuck at the very beginning and I ran off in the wrong direction. I've worked with a number that, you get down into the depths of it and you've got a team, you've got sales people, you've got sales development reps, and like you're not producing anything. You've got one guy who's doing one thing, you got one person who's doing another thing, and like they're getting totally dramatically different results and you're not sure why. And I think one of the challenges is like if you're not taking this lens of strength of product market fit and applying it to different markets, you go into a different market with a different product, different value prop, it's a different market. Your strength of product market fit is going to vary. And so I wanted to help people see that. And then I wanted to help draw the connection between, doing this like university style research project where you're interviewing all these people and there's no stakes, right? And then teaching founders how to take all the people that you talk to in your customer development process and turn them into your first customers. And I use Dave McClure's, have you seen his Pirate Metrics presentation? It's
Nope.
AARR. It's acquisition, activation, revenue, retention, referral. I might have the R's backwards.
Okay.
But I basically take that and I look at it as I take a few things out. But effectively, if you look at the ratio of the number of people that you talk to the number of people that refer you to somebody else to talk to,
right.
That's a strong indication that you are talking about a pain that they really care about and that lots of people care about. If you talk to somebody and they can't wait to get you off the phone or Zoom, it's probably a sign that this isn't a really top priority for them, right? But when you run into people that are struggling and you're asking them about the thing that they are struggling with the most, that is going to unlock real revenue, real job opportunity for them, that's going to unlock a new market for them, you cannot get them to shut up. And it doesn't matter what industry you're in or what type of person you're talking to. If you find a real pain, people want to talk about it.
Oh, for sure. And I think this is this classic thing, right? It's like you never want, as a salesperson or someone who has to sell something, you never want to educate your consumer on the value of your product or service. Like that should be implicit. You should be past that if you're going to have a successful kind of interaction. And then it's just a question of like, to what degree are they excited? And, post questions to do with like negotiation. Okay. But I'm very keen on this book and like what's in the book and how it kind of like structures the lessons learned that you had, but also the title. Let's go back to the title. The title is, what was it again?
The Terrifying Art of Finding Customers.
Right. So let's stop on the terrifying bit. Okay. So like, what have you found in your experience? Because you've helped so many startup founders kind of approach market, right? What is everyone afraid of? What's terrifying about sales? Is it failure?
Death of the company. Yeah, it's the failure. I mean, I think there's so many things, but it's the variability, it's the black box of it. It's the fact that if you're not coming from a sales background, and like most founders don't, stepping into this thing where you don't know if you're doing a good job of selling is impossible to kind of figure out, right? If you've never hired an engineer before, it's impossible to hire a good engineer, right? Maybe not impossible, but very, very challenging if you don't know anything about it. And so if you're stepping into the sales role and you don't know what good looks like and you're not getting the results, it's really hard to tell. Is it because I'm not doing a good job as a salesperson? Is it because people don't want the product? Is it because there's all of these reasons? And so I think it's scary because it's a little bit black boxy where you can't see what's happening inside. It's really hard to kind of track down why deals aren't going anywhere. And I think most founders don't ask enough questions in the sales process to really know. And so what I think the common experience of a founder selling for their first, I don't know, couple deals or maybe more is you have a bunch of great conversations with people that are really excited to see your product.
Right.
And then some of them go somewhere and some of them don't. And you don't understand why some go ahead and some don't. And the reason is people aren't asking the right questions. They're not going deep enough in the conversation. They're doing the show up and throw up, where somebody asks you what you do, and then you spend the next 28 minutes showing them the demo and the admin panel and everything that you've ever built in the product, and spending 2 minutes talking about their pain and how they want to solve it.
So why is it an art and not a science? Sales.
You know, I spent 13 years in cold email and 10 years in sales before that. And I genuinely feel like a snake oil salesman anytime anybody asks me about email deliverability, because from a scientific or statistically significant factor, there's no evidence, that you would rate that you could document and say, okay, there's tons of evidence, but there's not a lot of statistically significant samples in the data sets and things that we've been doing. And so I know a lot about email deliverability, or I have a lot of ideas and suspicions and guesses, but I cannot prove statistically anything with any level of like actual confidence. I'm not writing about this and going to get published in Science, not even a subjournal, and so to me, it is a mix of, there are, just like an art, there are forms and styles that you need to follow. And it is something that you learn through experience, as opposed to a science where, you have to follow this precise methodology and you will get the same outcome. You can follow the exact same process in 99 sales conversations, and the outcome is going to vary wildly because you're dealing with humans. And
Exactly. And I think that that kind of like it being a soft skill and it being related to communication implicitly. The fact that like in order to articulate value for somebody about anything, whether you're selling something for free or for money, is all about easily expressing value and enabling trust to form, right?
I think trust is the biggest one. And before even trust, I think it comes into your mindset as a founder stepping into the sales role. I think people hear sales and they think used car salesman, or they think it is my job to talk to this person on the other side of the Zoom link and sell them some stuff. I need to convince them to buy. But selling isn't convincing people to buy. Selling is helping somebody understand their pain, helping them understand the unique shape of their pain and the unique shape of your product, and assessing whether or not there's a genuine fit. And that's going to vary from customer to customer. And some are going to be great fit customers and some aren't. And that's okay. And telling customers, I don't think it's a good fit, and here's why. There's this thing, if you think about it like a radar graph, or like a plot graph,
Mhm.
there's spider graph. There's a different shape, all the different variables. If there isn't a strong alignment, there isn't strong alignment. You don't want to sell churn. And so understanding that it is okay not to do that, and that your first job is to understand the shape of their problem, because there's nobody in the world that knows your product better than you from how this product solves their pain. And there's nobody in the world that knows better than you the process of solving the problem with your product.
And another thing that I find that people forget about as well in sales, and especially in B2B sales, right, where deals might be more complicated depending on the dollar value and the service mix, is the customer's pain point might be related to other pain points, and they might be
Mhm.
drowning. Like, especially in today's, volatile market reality, you have a lot of businesses where there's a lot of problems under the hood. And though you might solve a problem, that problem might be lower down the ranking pole to whoever you're
Mhm.
selling, because they've got a house on fire. And so that's an interesting, I think, it's something I've learned in the last little while, especially last year, or let's say since, tariff Trump madness
Mhm.
circa April or whatever it was, um, only a couple months ago. Like this idea of kind of like, if you can't ascertain, and I think this is, I'd love your thoughts on this, like how, perhaps this is an open question, how can B2B salespeople get better at gauging receptiveness in forming deals?
It's a big question. There's a couple of variables that come into it. The things that a lot of sales teams get wrong is simply definitions. And it doesn't, I'm not saying you have the wrong definitions, but often companies do have the wrong definitions of sales process. And this is the starting point, because if you're looking in your pipeline and you get two different reps and they're using qualified the stage differently, your data, your pipeline is meaningless. It's impossible to sit and have a conversation, because you have to add, the rep has to give you 15 minutes of wind up before you get to the meat of it. So as somebody who's trying to assess, why did we lose this deal? Where are we at in this deal? The information overhead that it takes to get there is like a 15-minute task just to understand on every single deal, just because you don't have the right sales definitions. You can call them whatever you want, but I highly, highly, highly encourage you to use objective, customer verifiable outcomes as your stages. So
And
that's kind of,
also, and it's just like the product market fit thing, knowing your sales target profile really well is
mhm,
going to help you kind of learn from your sales process and refine it, but also, and messaging and all that.
mhm.
But so anything to say about that too is like locking in targets and understanding a profile also has its own maybe fluidity.
Yeah. And if I could finish the first question, because there's a
Yeah.
few more pieces to it. So, like,
Continue.
when you think about why are deals not closing, right? What is the information that I want to know? I want to know where the deal is at. And when I say where the deal is at, I don't want to know what my seller has done. I want to know what the customer has done. Have they shown up to a call? Did they bring the economic decision maker to a call? Have they had a deep look at our product and said, yes, it meets our criteria? The shape of your product matches the shape of our problem. Have they told us, have they confirmed that they're going to do something about the problem? Not necessarily with us, but have they confirmed that the problem that you have found is big enough that it justifies them doing something about it, right? Basically, is do nothing off the table. And then there's all these other kind of variables, but those are kind of the big sales stages in my mind. That tells me where the buyer is at in their process. Not if it's going to close, but it tells me where the deal is at. Because if you're telling me you're going to close this deal and you haven't talked to the economic decision maker, I don't care if you say it's 80%, but it's not, right? And if you look at the data, if you look at the math, it's just it's not very likely to close if you haven't talked to the person who's actually signing the check. And so what we're doing is a process of de-risking a deal. You want to learn more information. So sales stage, telling you where the buyer is at, is the first piece of information. Then you need a qualification framework, BANT, and MEDDPICC. I like MEDDPICC. It was taught to me by Jamie Buss when she was the VP of sales for North America at Zendesk. And back in 2018, she was forecasting $500 million in revenue within 1% a quarter. She was telling was like 125 million a quarter within 1%, which is like unbelievable amount of precision. Right. And so I stole a bunch of this from Jamie. The MEDDPICC system tells you how much information you know. I won't go into all of it, but if you're listening and you're struggling with like, why aren't deals closing? Go look at MEDDPICC and then start scoring each of your deals with MEDDPICC. You could just feed a transcript to GPT and say, hey, give me a MEDDPICC on this. The most important three, though, are identified pain. So like, have you identified a real problem? Metric, which is how do you quantify the impact of solving that pain or not solving it, right? If you found, like with the CRM example, I found pain, but it was probably like a $12 a month pain.
Right.
And I wanted $500 a month. Nobody really cared. And nobody cared, even if it was free, nobody cared enough to do anything about it because it was a teeny, tiny pain. So finding the pain and having a good definition of what that is, understanding the impact. Is it going to make them more revenue? Is it going to save them more cost? Is it going to reduce their risk? Right. And then the third piece is the economic decision maker. Have you had a conversation with them and do you understand what their priorities are? And then when I'm working with a rep, I'll score these, or a founder: 0, no information; 1, you know some; 2, you know everything you need to know. And I will do like a MEDDPICC score on a deal because it tells me where the rep has gone wrong in their process or the founder has gone wrong. It tells me what was missed. It tells me what information I have. Usually the MEDDPICC scores are pretty low. And I'm sure if somebody's doing this at home, don't be discouraged if your MEDDPICC score is pretty low. The value in this comes from repeating it, scoring one deal every week and getting a little bit better, because this tells you where you need to focus. It tells you where in the process you might be going wrong. And there's a bunch of tactical things you can do. But if you go and pick customer verifiable outcomes as your stages, and you enforce everybody who's putting a deal in your pipeline is using the same stage definitions, and then you're running a qualification on each of them, and you're testing folks on, hey, are we following the qualification framework? You will have a much better insight into why deals aren't moving forward and what to do about them. Because chances are, if you get a pipeline with 67 opportunities and a bunch of them aren't moving forward, it means they're probably not opportunities. It means they're not real opportunities right now. It doesn't mean they're dead. It doesn't mean they're never going to buy from you. Chances are a bunch of them are going to buy from you. They're just not ready to buy from you right now. And that's the big thing to understand, is when a deal goes away, or when somebody ghosts, or when somebody just ignores you or doesn't want to move forward, it doesn't mean no, now, not now, not ever, leave me alone and perish. It means it's not a priority for us right now.
Yeah, so, and not exclusively that, though. Not exclusively that. It's just that, because this is another thing that's gotten kind of crazy, I think, in the last little while too, is that it's cultural phenomenon, right? Like corporate cultural phenomenon has changed in the last few, let's call it half decade, with the remote work and hybrid and, staff churn and all sorts of stuff. And then like funding locks on if you're selling into startups. There's all the questions of like, how healthy is the company? Well, we don't know. So I find I have to do this. I have to do a lot of like deep research on sales targets once they hit a certain price point and I'm invested in converting them. I need to know everything I need to know about how the company is doing and try and approach sales from a multi target angle. Like it's really essential in today's, I think, sales methodology, for at least like for us, for example, if we're doing deals where it's like in the Startwell example, let's say we have a large multinational who wants to come in for a mixture of space, in-person, like kind of events for internal corporate use, and then also for media production. And then media production has nuances because like, what are their aims for it? What are they trying to articulate on camera? How important is that to them internally? What budget is it coming out of? Like there's so much information you gotta understand. And then it's not just who's signing off, it's also whose credit card is that going on, because the guy signing off might have to put on someone else's budget. So doing that analysis and having patience for it often cases means you have to either like delay a deal or claw it back a little bit and work so many of these angles. And like weird things happen these days. Like we have a really good client that like super high satisfaction came here for an offsite, and they absolutely loved it. Every single member of the 150 staff that were here, 200 staff, and they're like, we're gonna, the person who's the target who's gonna like pay for it and authorize the purchase was saying, okay, we're gonna use you guys all through next year. We're gonna have bookings with you every month. We're gonna make you the de facto place where our teams go because they love it. And I was like, great. I took it for face value. I trust that person. But that person got busy and distributed their portfolio of responsibilities to like 5 different people internally. And I had to convert each one of those people into advocates of our brand, because even though there's trust and brand equity there and all this, and they understood it, and those people might have even been here, they didn't have that directive to procure from us. And and you see this in junior roles as well, right? On the buyer side, where a lot of people don't know how much leeway they have to handle a deal, and to like, so new people in jobs are trying not to get shanked often and drive costs down. But this is the weird rub. And with this particular case, is what happened is, so the ball got dropped. We thought it was a ghosting situation, and maybe they'll come back to us later. And they would have come back to us later. But they had a slate of bookings they needed to place somewhere. And essentially, without me having to do the research to figure out how to articulate to the person who was junior, who was handling the purchasing decision, I wasn't able to have clarity on the fact that they were working on a different budgeting paradigm than their boss was. And we had to discount down to 40% of what we would normally charge just to win this deal. But we had to win the deal in order to win the customer in the long term, because I'm willing receptiveness to negotiate with us as part of our cultural reality, right? So that's very nuanced, and that's a weird thing. And this is also like, not every seller has discounting capability as well, who's running a sheet of contacts. But I don't know. What do you think about this like market volatility changing sales question?
Yeah, I mean, I think priorities are changing a lot quicker now than they were a few years ago. I mean, there's been a couple of large events that have happened in the last few years, with, obviously COVID, then, the funding, I don't know, bonanza that happened shortly after, then the lack of funding, then AI, then this, then AI, then this, then, so I think there's always things that are changing, and our job as a seller is to de-risk the deal. And when I say de-risk, I mean asking good questions, running great discovery so that you know where all the variables are, so that if you've got somebody who is about to get really busy because they're going into their busy season, or they have 5 direct reports that they're going to offload things. Asking questions that are going to help you uncover things like this, especially for extremely large deals, seem like you might be being too pushy, but really what you're trying to optimize for is a great experience for the client. And when I kind of mentioned earlier, our job as stepping into the sales role is to help them solve problems. And you don't want your buyer to run into challenges or friction or obstacles implementing. And so you want to make sure that you understand what all the variables are ahead of time. You understand where all the potential snags coming down the pipeline might be. And if there are going to be multiple stakeholders in a buying decision or running multiple events, I want to make sure I'm having a conversation with them, because every different individual that's in a deal that I haven't had a conversation with is a risk. It's a risk in that I don't know what their priorities are. If somebody new enters the sales process and we're halfway through, we're 3-4 calls in, I'm going to restart. I'm going back to, okay, tell me what your problems are. Tell me how you see this. Here's roughly what I do, but I want to restart and totally understand what your perspective is, because they might be bringing in the most important person in the deal. And if we just continue on assuming the deal is going to close without respecting where they are in the process, it's really hard to drag people along.
Right.
What you really need to do is find out where folks are at, what's important to them, and then help them understand, answer the questions they need to in order to make a decision. As salespeople, we're not making decisions for people. We are facilitators. We are solutions therapists, where we're here to sit down, shut up, and listen, and maybe make a couple of recommendations at the end of the day. But we're not here to, there's no magic words or secret handshakes to make people buy from you. I wish there was. I spent more time than I'd like to looking for these like secret words. I read a bunch of books on NLP and, if you phrase it this way, you phrase it that way. None of them work. It's not worth doing. And like, I remember vividly trying one in a sales call, and the guy called me out on it. And I was like, if I had a gun, I wouldn't be alive right now. Like, I was
He's like,
mortified.
are you trying to hypnonize me into this purchase? Yep. You're like, look at my watch. Look at my watch.
They basically said, like, you're better than this. Like don't be like that.
Oh, I was like, so sad.
Oh, you're right. I apologize. I did not get their deal, and I stopped doing that nonsense a long time ago. But I used to believe that I was able to do that. And if you want to get philosophical about it, you look at Kant, the categorical imperative. I think, if I'm getting that right, where you want to treat prospects as ends, not a means to an end. So a prospect or a potential buyer is not a means to get your commission. A prospect is somebody who has pain, and they are an ends themselves. They are a customer themselves. They are not a means for me to get my money. And so when you treat them as such, you change your relationship with them. You change the way you think about the process. You change the way you sit in the conversations. It's no longer me versus them. I'm trying to convince you to do something. It's, hey, let me understand. I'm sitting next to you here. Let's work on this puzzle together. I want to understand what's important to you. And I know what our tool is good at, or our solution is good at. And I'll be honest and candid about where I think it's a fit and where I don't think it's a fit.
It's funny because, even as a business owner, I'll say this, and especially if there's people listening that are not sitting on the ownership or the leadership side, but they are just trying to like grunt it out to sell stuff, to understand the other side of the table is, if anyone walks into my office or calls me or emails me with a clear value proposition that's going to save me money, make me money, and otherwise make my life way easier than it is, you're my best friend. And it's that simple. Like, that's all I want. I've got too much on my plate. My plate is expensive and the food is flavorless. Like, come in and help this meal make it awesome. And you can sit with me and eat. Like, and I think that like everyone has that opinion, especially in like SMBs, right? Like, once you're kind of like super big corporate, there's obviously like politics, some of the stuff we've talked about in working, that kind of corporate politics is a little bit more involved. But in small organizations and selling into them, even if they're, from my experience, let's call it like 1,000 headcount or under, people have an appetite for solutions. They have an appetite for solutions. And this came up actually in a discussion at Tech for Canada, which is this week that I held during Toronto Tech Week, where we had a discussion on stage with James McKay and Kyle Norton. And we were talking about this idea that like, even AI, a lot of the people in the audience were really curious about AI and how can AI solve all of our like sales friction. And the assumption is always like, yay, we have like a robot fleet of SDRs now, right? And like outbound times 1,000,000. But that's the wrong approach for so many reasons, some of which we've talked about already. And then the other thing that they kind of came back to the audience with was to say, well, look, I mean, you can use AI in different ways. Like, you can use AI to create solutions that enable communication amongst your sales force and give them access to information. Like Kyle said, one of the coolest things that I've done is create an AI version of me. So now my whole sales team can actually just like dig into my brain whenever they want. And I've saved half of my calendar. And like, that's super efficiency, right? Similarly, like knowledge basing, whatever the sales team needs to know about the company. So really quickly, they can get better understanding the product and the solution. They can call up cases of customer history where the solution has solved a problem for someone in segment or in a competitive arena with the person they're talking to, and all these other things.
Totally. And if I could reflect back something to you, those aren't new problems, right?
Right.
AI is just enabling us to solve old problems in new and better ways. There were solutions to these problems, but before, but AI just made them better, right? Or enabled you to solve some of them that previously you couldn't solve. Like you previously couldn't clone yourself, but you could spend time writing documentation and writing the one of the things that enabling or disruptive technologies let us do is solve new problems. But there still needs to be that inherent problem there in the first place. Like AI is cool and I work with it and play with it all the time. But if you're not solving a problem that people really care about, it's going to be a tricky sale.
Yeah, always. Um, do you want to call out some of those tools that you use?
I'm playing around with clay.com quite a bit. I mean, my day job, I've got like a couple things on the go, but my day job is helping founders find their first customers and build their first sales team, kind of everything in between. And I do a ton of work in Clay. And so Clay paired with GPT 4.1 Mini, that model is an absolute workhorse for classifiers. It is like, I'll take a list of 25,000 companies, pass it the description into a classifier prompt, and like, hey, tell me if this is a software company or B2B. Like super, super easy. And it would cost like, I think the last time I did it, it cost me $12.50 to look at 25,000 companies. I used it to build a whole list of investors. I took every investor, every VC and PE firm on LinkedIn. I also did it with investors, but I did some slightly different data. And I said, okay, here's the description. Is this a PE or VC firm or a company servicing that industry? That's very valuable information to have. You can pay a bunch of money for PitchBook, or you can just go look at it. And so 4.1 Mini, absolute workhorse. It even works for running Claygen, where you go out and say, hey, scrape the web and go look for this and go look for that. When you pair it with Clay, you can do some really cool things. For like a penny, you can go and have it research the company's GitHub and look for keywords and folks' job titles on the engineering team. So you could tell if a company's building AI themselves or if they're just buying the solution. And like that is something that you could have done in the past, but you would have to hire a huge workforce of humans to go click around the internet. And we used to have a sales research department at PR, and they don't have jobs anymore because AI can do that faster and cheaper and much more effectively. It was also a terrible job in the first place. Like
combing through data, finding the data, combing through it, especially because there's also things like synonyms and syntax relevancy and all of this sort of stuff that takes no SQL to be able to prompt, or not no SQL, whatever database is running, fake database, non-database is running behind all these GPTs. I don't understand the tech anymore. Okay, so anything else? I like this. Clay for like tying things together, right? And processing information. GPT for kind of a little bit of analysis on stuff.
Yeah, and GPT as part of Clay. Like that's the best part is Clay lets you how like Outreach, SalesLoft, Apollo, those are all like basically mail merge tools where, you take a first name, you inject that variable into the email, you send it out. Clay lets you do that same thing, but to prompts, and then scale it up and run it on 25,000. So if you're copying and pasting into ChatGPT, you're probably doing it wrong. You just write the prompt, give it enough context, let it rip. That's the way to do it. So I do quite a bit with those two. Personally, I use a lot of custom GPTs. So if I find I'm doing something repetitive, there's so many AI tools out there, and I'm probably the anomaly, but I'm fairly capable with writing prompts and getting things to work the way I want. And I like that level of control. There are so many things that you can do if you have a tool like Granola running in the background, recording the conversation. And then it's just an offline, like it runs locally. It records the transcript of everything. I think it's running and recording right now for me. So I have the transcript of this audio, like mine and yours. I use it on my client calls so that I can copy and paste into my client call recap live on a call, and I can send it to them and review. Okay, this is what we're going to do next week. And I've got a GPT-5 GPT that'll do that. I've got a proposal bot. So it's got all my proposal data. It's got the way I structure everything, and I can live copy paste it into a GPT, copy paste that into a doc, and in literally 1 minute or less, I can have a very detailed scope of work based precisely on the conversation I'm having with the prospect. That feels like magic. And
Yeah.
like, I love all the proposal tools out there, but I just use Google Docs now because it works so much better for that process. And so custom GPTs are amazing. And it's not, I mean, not free, but it's $20 a month. And it's included in the $20 a month plan. And then I use NA to N, which is a little bit geekier, a little bit more challenging to set up. And, but it allows you to scale up things like, you basically automate the process I'm just talking about. I record all my calls on Zoom, and then I have NA watch for when I finish a call, and then pass it to this prompt, run the output in, copy paste the output into, or create a Google Doc, paste the output, and then share it with me, so that after every call, 15 minutes later, I get an email with, here's your client call recap. And all I have to do is review it and share it to the client.
Yeah. That's exciting. That's automatically baked into, we're big fans of this company that, another local company, but it's called Open Phone. And so that's my soft phone. And it's I forget what they called it. Sora, something like that. Sarah, Sira, dude, all these AI names, the like anthropomorphization. Is that the right way of saying it? Is
close enough.
Yeah, right. Some suzz in there missing, but like, it's crazy, man. This idea of like adding names to all this tech and whatever, they're all like robots. So they have this robot, does the same thing. So records, transcribes client calls, and then it combs through them for next steps. And the idea is, I haven't been playing with this yet, but like integrating that with something that can activate the next step, right? For me, it's just pinging people on the team to like, pick up on the next thing. But that's where there's a lot of power, is in this like automated workflow stuff. But that's interesting. Yeah. So that's a good bunch of things. And what's your take on that whole thing though, on this like outreach question, on like automating outreach and first touch?
I mean, scaling up cold outbound and pretending that you're a human sending an email when really it's a machine that's doing it is a little bit disingenuous, right? I think everybody accepts it now. We all know that a human didn't one-to-one send this email. And like, I remember back when that was controversial, that like, oh no, I would never send cold email. It's just not honest. I don't want people to think I'm, just sending millions of these emails. That's kind of gone away. And now I'm kind of in the camp of, I'm not really a fan of AI messaging. I don't like the idea of, I understand its importance for email deliverability. If you are sending absolute gobs of email, then letting an AI change the words in your email so it says pretty much the same thing with different words, gives it a different fingerprint to Google, so it looks like enough of a different message to Google that it's not going to put you in the bucket that's most like the highest risk bucket.
Right.
That's the reason why cold email shops use AI. What I don't love about that is that you're adding enough variability into your message that
that's scary.
You could go from something that's totally on point to something that's totally not. And it induces a bunch of randomness because it's a non-deterministic process. And so every time I found I've gotten comfortable with, okay, I'm good for this messaging to go out, I'm like, I gave it 3 templates to write. Like, I put so many guardrails into the guidance that it can really only write 2 or 3 different versions of it. And so I'm like, why don't I put less work in and just send 3 different versions? Like, if that's the kind of outcome I'm looking for, then it's me writing it. And I don't like the idea of introducing that variability because it has the potential to hallucinate. It has the potential to say something silly. And your first impression with a client is important. And so I like to control the words. That being said, to my earlier point about having our sales research team using AI to ingest unique data that would help you understand if your solution is more or less relevant to a prospect right now at scale is one of the things I'm most excited about in the go-to-market space right now. I've been using 4.1 mini quite a bit, and honestly, like 5's out, but 5 mini is not as good in terms of like adherence, intelligence, ability, and cost. It's still cheaper and more reliable than 5 mini. And so 4.1 mini, the absolute game changer, processing huge amounts of data, finding signals in places where you didn't think you'd be able to. And so taking a loop of, okay, go search the internet, go find this thing, Now structure the output. So yes, they have this. No, they don't have this. Hey, I found this evidence for here. Now here's the score. To be able to say, hey, go do to an agent, go do these 25 searches, structure the output of what you found into these 4 columns, and then go run that on 25,000 accounts. And to have that only cost $2,500 is unbelievable, because it's just something you would never do previously. And so there are times where I like want to laugh like an evil, I don't know, genius, and just say like, I have unlimited power. And there are other times you do all this work and it produces absolutely nothing because the signal turns out not to be that relevant. And so I try not to get too full of myself, but it is really fun to be able to look at a list of 25,000 and be like, I'm going to know quite a bit about this company for $100, or quite a bit about these companies for $100. Like, that just feels like magic.
Yeah. Because you've saved yourself so much digging and time.
You just wouldn't do it. You wouldn't do it. And you know that your competitors don't have that signal. And so it's not you and your competitor both reaching out to the same Zoom info list, right? Like, that's the thing about sales development, that with the proliferation of the tools, the proliferation of the information, your competitors have access to the same tools, to the same information. But with tools like 4.1 Mini and Clay, you can build these filters, find these signals that nobody else has access to. They can try and find them, but if you put enough work into it, I think there's some alpha to be found in this type of digging, this type of research. And I've got some cool things, but I'm keeping them close to the chest, because the more they get out, the less effective they are.
Right. It's already a good list, and it's probably inspiring to people that are kind of like still figuring out how they want to deal with massive amounts of potential data at their fingertips. Okay, so someone reads, let's go back to the book for a second. Someone reads this book, how are they better by the end of it?
I think they'll understand the importance of the strength of product market fit. They'll understand how to go to the folks that you interviewed as part of your customer development process and slowly convert them into customers. That, I think, to me, is the most, revenue positive piece of the book, because so many founders I've talked to, they do this university level research project. They talk to 100 people, 200 people, and then none of those people become customers because they didn't want to go back and ask the awkward question, or they didn't maintain the relationship. And so part of it, I share this like ladder of like, how do you walk somebody from, hey, I'm here to learn, and then eventually kind of warm them up and say, hey, can I invite you into the sales process? Or like, would you like to join me in the sales process? And the way to do that without bait and switching people into interviews or meetings or anything like that, and do it honestly, that's probably one of my favorite things. And then there's a bunch of stuff in there for founders that are trying to figure out how to be a salesperson and how to understand the black box and the things that you need to capture, what goes into building a real sales system, a real sales team, into being a real salesperson. Those are, there's quite a bit in there of how to do that kind of stuff. But it starts off on the customer development side. And my goal when I started writing this version of the book was to kind of bridge the gap between customer development and sales. So like, what do I need to do tactically to find product market fit, make sure it's strong enough to invest, and then to step into the sales role as a non-salesperson.
And I think that's something that's a trend, isn't it? Like, what would you say with all the companies that you're working with, on that kind of consultancy side of helping them develop sales organizations from zero to hero? What in the last 5 years has changed about who is coming into these roles, if at all?
Oh, I mean, it's the founders are stepping in quite a bit more now. I think more people are starting to see it, at least the ones that have gone through the top tier venture capital firms. They are a lot more aware of it. I still run into founders that have raised so much money that they just go and hire a sales team before they have like more than 10 customers. And like, I think that's a colossal waste of money, because it's the founder trying to get sales off the plate. Like, closing your first 10, 100 customers, that first $500,000 to $1 million in revenue is not a function of sales. It is a function of the customer development process. It is the practicum project for your whole college degree in customer development, right? It doesn't, all of this research, all of these meetings, this is not customer development unless you turn some of them into customers. So this is the prove it moment. You think you've got product market fit? Great, go prove it. Sell to the people that told you this was a problem, because they've already told you it's a problem. You've already done 70% of the sales process. The last 30% is just, can you afford it? Is the timing right for you to solve it right now? Like, these are going to be the easiest sales you make in your entire life, and most people don't do them.
To that end, do you think for bootstrap-based businesses, we're at an exciting time because of this access to information and the greater ability, perhaps, for founder-led sales?
Yeah, absolutely. I bootstrapped all of my companies, and I think it's never been easier to do more. That probably also makes it harder because it's never been easier to do more. And so you probably maybe take on a little bit too much, or, before you couldn't pursue an SEO strategy because you weren't an SEO expert, but now you've got one in your, in your fingertips. So you can do more, and probably creates more decision paralysis of trying to figure out what to do. But yeah, I've been able to scale up quite a bit of what I'm doing as a founder, because I've got PR, I've got the book, and I've got a company called Reply Loop that I'm working on as my startup. And so I'm doing more than I used to.
Yeah, you have lots of arms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The Reply Loop is we're trying to solve email for property managers, and specifically residential property managers, because they get a really high volume, an extremely high volume of low complexity email that is just ripe for an AI to auto-generate a response. The tricky bit is identifying the right type of response to draft based on all the different information. And so my wife's a property manager, and she's got a bunch of friends that are property managers. I see the unbelievable amounts of email they get. And folks tend to use their property manager like Wikipedia, like human Google, like, hey, answer this question for me that I could go read a document, but I don't know where that document is, and I never logged into the portal. And right. So I think AI is ripe for disrupting that, and we're trying to make a dent in solving it.
Nice. That's exciting, man. I'm all about email. I think like fun things to clean up email, make email more efficient, make it easier, and superpower it are always awesome. I was just talking to a founder earlier this morning who's an ex-YC guy about Jerry Tan, right? Jerry Tan, who's running YC these days. I remember emailing Jerry Tan and his partners at Posterous, because did you ever use that company or remember that company?
I remember the name, but I never used them.
So this is how like he got into startup stuff through that company, and then years later is running YC. But they had this wicked company, and what it was basically like, it was trying to solve blogging using email. They were like, blogging's a pain in the ass. You don't want to log into WordPress and have to deal with all this interface crap. And this is this was going back to like, I don't know, must have been like 2006 or something like that. So this was before you could do front end editing on anything. So you'd have two distinct interfaces, right? You like edit in some editing interface and then publish, but you couldn't envision how that would look. So they were saying, well, if you can't envision what it looks like anyway, why don't we simplify it? And we create a codex for formatting emails that you send to a server, and all the attachments get automatically mashed up with that text, and we'll hyperlink stuff and all automatically. So you're just blogging via email. And I started using it. Yeah, I started using it and I fell in love with it. And I was like user number 10. And so I was like public beta testing it for them and emailing them every day. And I'm sure I could dig up emails with Jerry, and I'm like, this is great. You got to do this. You got to do this. And they were like, that magic. And I think this is something that sales team can understand as well. If they have history in sales outside of startups and versus startups, is that there's something very unique, especially for software, that is enabled by relating the solution provider directly to the solution user, because it's not just like you're selling something that's static. I'm not selling you this magazine off the shelf and I'm saying, read it, it's going to be great, and when it's done, pass it off to someone else. The articles keep rewriting themselves, and I think that's brilliant. And you could say, what do you want to read about next month? And that idea that like you can solicit client feedback to develop the software to essentially keep solving problems for someone, it should be more often part of the sales process. And I never see people telling that story because they're always so like ashamed, especially in B2B enterprise sales. If you're selling startup software in an enterprise, you feel like, oh, they need this to be like, Pentagon grade security. And so I can't admit that like we've got 4 devs and they're doing the work of 20.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I find that really weird.
Yeah. I think a lot of folks, they don't want to admit that they are not, 100-person or 500-person company. And I think founders are doing themselves a disservice by maybe over-representing where they are. Because if you're really candid and honest with folks, it's going to help you find better matches, and you're going to build a higher level of trust in those conversations, whether it's customer development or sales or wherever it is. We don't have Pentagon level security. We just have hexagon level security. Like, is that good enough?
And I've learned this a long time ago too, is that I think the apprehension, a big part of an apprehension facet of sales is the misalignment between the seller and the person who's buying, in terms of the seller not understanding the reality of the person who's buying, right? So they're guesstimating, but they don't have enough information to guesstimate on. Perfect manifestation of this is the seller assuming that there are problems, like that they don't want to articulate. And what they might think of as problems are not problems, because they might be temporary non-solutions. So there's a lot of convolution around this idea of like, when you're trying to make a deal happen, what you do say and what you don't say. Often cases that's part of like training the SDRs, like, monkeys to read English for the first time. And it's like, just repeat this, repeat this, repeat this. And then they do feel like AI. And then the customer never gets the true story. And then you get those calls where it's like, the customer's so into it. They're like, this is so cool, man. Like, what's happening with this? And they're like, I don't know. Like, what are you going to do with this function in 6 months? Because that could really save us. I don't know. And you see that a lot too. So again, going back to that idea of like, I think for me, companies can use AI to better inform their sellers about what their 360 is on everything. Really important. And I'm seeing this, I don't know if you're seeing this, but I'm definitely seeing an increased need for, like, typically sellers are going to be the number one vocal proponents of a company, right? Their brand manifest. Like, that's the way I look at it. And if you're the manifestation of the brand, you're out there developing new stakeholder relationships for our company. That's not sales. Like, we got to almost move away from that idea of just the transaction identifying you, and instead say, well, I'm representing this company, so I need to know everything about it. Super important point. That, I think it's the buyer's assumption as well today is that, like, if someone's going to talk about their thing and they're not bullshit, they need to be able to tell me a lot more than just what my immediate pain point is. Because I got lots more pain, like I said, whether it's something that they don't know about or that is coming down the road.
Yeah. I mean, I think the role of the buyer has shifted pretty dramatically since I've been in sales. It used to be very much, if you just look at the access to information that folks used to have, right? Maybe you would have, I started selling like 20 plus years ago.
What did you start selling?
I mean, I sold cell phones in high school, like cell phone contracts at a TELUS dealer in high school. I've sold sporting goods even before that, like hockey gear, snowboards, that kind of stuff. But like the real sales, I sold wheelchair accessibility or egress lifts. So basically, if there's a burning building, you need to have these little chairs to get folks in wheelchairs out, because you can't use the elevator and most people can't carry somebody down the stairs. So I sold those. That was like my first cold calling job. I've sold diesel generators to mines and data centers. I've sold kitchen cabinetry to high rises. I did that I started a division within a big furniture company at the beginning of 2008. And I signed my first $1.5 million deal, getting paid a very generous commission check. Summer of 2008 rolled around. Economy kind of wasn't doing us any favors. And, the whole subprime mortgage thing lost me a $150,000 commission check. So I've sold a lot, from most, like, quite a bit in construction, quite a bit in software over the last 13 years. But yeah, everything from big deals to medium sized deals. And I think I have a preference for the medium size, low drama, lower political level deals. Those long-term $1 million deals, I just don't have the patience for.
It's tough. It's tough to stay invested, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's a different sport.
Yeah, it is. It is quite different. It's quite different. Okay, so let's wrap this up because I know we started late and I've spent a lot of your time. Thank you for it. And let's just talk again about this book. It's still coming out. So when is it going to be released and where can people pre-order it from? And then also, are you going on a roadshow? Are you going to be in person to introduce this book to people?
Yeah, no roadshow. Everybody asks me that, and I'm like, I think you're confusing me with an author who, is going to get on the Wall Street Journal bestseller list. I think this is going to be my hope is that this book is helpful for founders. My goal is to get it in front of as many founders as I can. I put 2 years of hard work and a lot of hard writing into this. Like, the writing part wasn't hard, but accessing the stories and the pain and being honest and candid about the things I screwed up and like reflecting on them, there was some emotion happening there, especially, when you consider the fact that in 2014 or 2015, I took a startup and went 0 to $1 million in 3 months in ARR in 3 months. And that startup doesn't exist anymore. And I don't have a huge exit under my belt. And my company's name isn't Outreach or Sales Loft. We were on that same pain point in the same timeline, and I screwed up a lot of things. And so there was some pain, but mostly it was positive. And so my goal is just to get it out, get the word out as much as possible. The way I'm also running Predictable Revenue, which is the main company where I'm helping founders. I'm also running Reply Loop. And so I'm not going to put my whole life on hold and go try and promote the book. I do think it is extremely valuable, but I'm not that level. I enjoy this conversation. I don't go and do the public speaking thing or the, pay me to be a speaker. I understand that's a great way to sell books, but my goal isn't to sell books. My goal is to help founders. And I have a strong belief in, like, writing a book can be kind of like being the gym teacher, like those that can't teach, those that can't teach gym, which I know folks that teach gym and they are phenomenally talented and it takes a lot. But like, I had this kind of same view about folks that wrote books, where those that can't do it anymore just write a book about it and then they try and live on the coattails of their previous experience. And I felt a really strong need in me not to just be the author, not to just be Collin the author of this book, but to be Collin the entrepreneur. And I probably spent more time than I wanted to kind of avoiding being the author, because I didn't want to just be an author. Like, I see myself as a founder, as an entrepreneur who happened to have written a book. Right. And so I'm not going to put my whole life into it. I do help the book is helpful. I am going to put a lot into getting the word out there, but I also want to work on my startup, and I really enjoy that. That's the thing that gives me energy, that makes me smile, that, is helping me work on the future of the version of the future that I want to be living in. And so I'm kind of splitting my time right now, but that's kind of where things are going.
Well, there you go. I think it's super inspiring because, and hopefully for the audience that like hears this, yeah, I mean, creative output and documentation and sharing knowledge is an amazing thing. And again, the path of writing a book shouldn't just be to be a public speaker and like lever up and start your school account and become a Hormozy,
Yeah, I don't want to do that. I see this as like a detour I took before jumping into my next thing. And like, the book's done, the book's out. I'm going to do my best to promote it, but I'm moving on to the next thing. My goal in life is not to sell 1 million books. My goal in life is to help folks and then continue working on my own startups.
Nice, man. Well, it's been a pleasure chatting and catching up and talking a little bit about kind of like sales and your some of the stuff that you're working on. The AI stuff is kind of interesting too. If there's anything like Okay, maybe this might be fun. Just like a last thing. Advice you can give founders, because you probably do it every day, right? But like top
Mhm.
advice you could give founders who have a check in their pocket and they're building a team. Anything, carte blanche. Today in
Don't
2025.
mhm. Don't hire a salesperson. Don't hire an SDR. Don't hire a VP of sales. Don't hire a sales manager. Don't do it. Keep that money in your bank until you've closed 500K in sales. Once you have done that, once you've completed that milestone, then you will know enough and you'll know what type of salespeople to hire. You'll know what sales structure you're going to need to reach more folks. But until you've crossed that milestone, you don't know enough, right? Like even myself, I got my startup on the side. I could start hiring folks, but I don't know enough about what the sales model is. I've got some suspicions, but you don't know until you've gone through the loop and you've succeeded at some of it, you've failed at a bunch of it, and you've figured out, okay, this is the right customer, this is the right way that we're going to present the solution, this is the thing they care most about. And the more folks you add into the organization, the harder the car is to steer. And so you want to be tight and agile and as close to the contact of the road as absolutely possible. And the contact here is contact with the customer, because everything they tell you they like, they don't like, they wish they had, this is all product feedback. And until you have closed $500,000, $1 million in sales, you don't have enough feedback to know where you need to build, to know who you need to hire, to know the sales playbook you need to run, to know exactly what the product needs to do. Like we've got a product, we're starting to sell it, but until you've proven that, hey, a bunch of people have bought it and they all like the same thing, you don't actually know. You can guess, you can have strong hypotheses, but you don't actually know. And I think a lot of founders shoot themselves in the foot by putting insulating layers between them and the end user and the customer. And it's like buying really high-end audiophile headphones and then sticking a piece of construction paper in between your ears and the headphones. You're like, you can do it. It's going to look silly, and but it's a terrible idea, right? I want to hear the high fidelity of the customer telling me all this feedback. I don't want any games of telephone in between me and them. And I think I compare it to a sailing race where you don't know where the finish line is. It doesn't matter how fast you're going if you don't know what direction you need to head in. Because if you're going 8, 9 knots east, but it turns out the finish line's actually, 5 miles west, you just spent a lot of time going in the wrong direction. And building out the company is kind of like that, where you can spend a ton of time and feel productive doing all of this great work. And I was guilty of this too. I hired a VP of marketing too early. I hired a salesperson too early. I hired a salesperson too late. Like I've made all these mistakes. I'm not saying this because I'm perfect. I'm saying this because I've learned these things and it cost me time and it increased the risk that my startup failed. And ultimately it did. And so I think the number one thing is like, don't hire. Don't hire until you're absolutely broken and cannot do another thing, until your calendar is so screwed that you can hardly afford the time to hire that person. Then make that hire, because then I guarantee you're going to know with a very great deal of fidelity exactly who it is you need to hire and how you're going to need to get their time. And then slowly build the organization out underneath you. I had a great conversation with Lars Nilsson. I kind of think of him as one of the godfathers of sales development. He built an amazing team at Cloudera. He was doing stuff at Oracle before then. He was recently the VP or global head of sales development for Snowflake. And he calls it bottleneck scaling, where you bottleneck yourself and then you find the one thing to kind of unleash a little bit of productivity. You take this one thing off the bottom, maybe off the side of your desk, and you hire somebody, you build a process, you hire somebody to do that. So I'm a big fan of bottleneck scaling and not hiring too early.
Brilliant. That's such fantastic advice, man. Nice.
Thanks.